I'm Luke.
I'm Frank Nolan.
And we're at the Teleflin Railway.
We're here in the Rev Awdry's study, the recreation of the Rev Awdry's study. The large majority is original. The desk, his chair, the typewriter, which we only discovered relatively recently. There was a replica typewriter which was on display for many years, but fortunately we found the original and we're keen to display it in its original form. And we believe this is the machine on which he wrote all his stories and of course his sermons, because as a clergyman he was a busy full-time clergyman also, so we believe that this is the machine on which he wrote his sermons also.
I'd say 90% of the books along this bookcase here are all original. There are editions which have been donated to the railway that are related to his works that we have put in to fill out the shelves because we didn't get everything. The actual bookcases themselves are recreations of what were there. But even behind us, the green filing cabinet, all of these maps and rolls on tops are original of Wilbert's. The chest of drawers down there full of the model railway spurs and other engines.
Radio.
Yeah, pretty much. Oh, stuff on the top here, that's mainly kind of memorabilia that has been donated relating to the railway series and Tom's the Tank Engine. But yeah, no.
And of course the relief map.
Yes, but for the most part, everything you see through that window is original and belong to Wilbert.
And as I mentioned before, I wish it was possible to convey the sense of atmosphere in here, because as I'm sure you've found yourself, there is a sense of the smell of books, leather, tobacco.
Whenever the family come, they do like to come inside, and they do say that it still smells like the original study, so we've managed to preserve the smell as well.
The whole building was reconfigured in 2005 as part of the Teleflin Railway's wharf station redevelopment project, and the museum in which the study is housed was part of that redevelopment in a purpose-built format. When
Wilbert passed away, he left the contents of his study at his home in Stroud to the Teleflin Railway Preservation Society, so we had the contents for quite a while. And when they were developing the scheme for rebuilding Wharf, it was decided to make this room to house it all and show it off and keep the legacy of probably our most famous volunteer alive.
Indeed, Wilbert was one of the early members of the Teleflin.
Number 79?
Yeah, in 1951 when he joined the society, I understand. And he started working in 1952 as a volunteer guard, booking clerk and plate layer, and some of the adventures he had formed the basis of many of his stories, which he was keen to incorporate in the railway series.
I'm not entirely sure exactly who it was that approached him, but what I imagine might have been Tom Rolls.
Could have been.
Or someone high up in the Preservation Society approached Wilbert, knowing his book series, going, is there a way you could work the Teleflin into this? And he was very keen because he already adored the place. And very quickly, the idea to... Well, his editors weren't keen on going away from the established standard gauge characters and away from Sodor. So it was developed like, we'll make a sister railway that is like the Teleflin, but not. And you've got all the engines, but not. And so you get the Skarloey Railway as a sister railway. It's on the island of Sodor. So the first Skarloey Railway book for Little Engines was published in October 1955. The plans for the Skarloeys date back to around 53, so only a year after he started volunteering. But from 1955 you did start seeing Peter Sam, Skarloey and all the other narrow gauge engines appearing in the books. So if you ever come down to the Teleflin Railway, you can meet all of the real versions of the characters, such as Skarloey is Teleflin, Renias is Dolgoch, Sir Handel is Sir Hayden, Peter Sam is Edward Thomas, Rusty is Midlander, Duncan is Douglas, and later on with Christopher's books you get Ivo Hugh, which is Tom Rolt.
So Wilbert was a volunteer. His son Christopher volunteered on the railway until relatively recently, and his grandson Richard maintains close contact with us to this day.
Yeah, we still have other members of the family do come down and volunteer when they can, and whenever they come to visit, we'll always, do our best to accommodate them, because it's such a special connection,
Indeed.
and it's quite personal to them as well. So we like to, make sure they're happy, and they support us and we'll support them. In the window we have Wilbert's, one of his last model railways, Farquhar branch, on display, but his modelling of Sodor and the North Western and Skarloey railways goes all the way back to 1948. It was the parish at Ampfield, and he had an outhouse, and he decided he wanted to build a model railway, and it was around the time he was starting to develop Sodor as a concept of where the railway was set, because he was getting children's letters coming through asking where this was all happening, because the standard gauge line is the North Western Railway because it's in the North Western region of England, but originally it stood for Nowhere Railway because he didn't know where it was just meant to be somewhere in Britain. And from that he started making models of the engines primarily for the illustrators to work from, because he had a bit of a rocky relationship with his first illustrators, so he built models to go, this is what they look like, please draw them like this. He didn't, he got fired. So he built Tidmouth to Knapford, which is the first stretch of the main line. He used the layout to raise funds for his church and bought things such as a wafer container, which has a little plaque that says Thomas the Tank Engine helped buy this for the church, and they've still got it. And from there it started expanding into just the crazy amount of fictional history. Then in the early 1950s he was asked to build a model railway for the Wisbech Trade Fair in 1956. And that's where the first version of Farquhar came into play. He'd moved to Emneth at this point, and the original layout had sadly been taken apart. He was building another one, a bit temperamental, and then he built this for the trade show, and that became his main layout, and that's affectionately known as Farquhar Mark 1, because it's the original one, and that lasted until 1968. Then he'd moved house to Stroud, he'd sold his car, it was too big, and it got rebuilt into the layouts that you'll be seeing in the video now. The
dimensions of which were predicated on the dimensions of his car.
Yes.
We even have drawings of the interior dimensions of the car, which constrain the dimensions of the Farquhar branch.
Yeah, so once that was rebuilt, it was much longer and thinner, but it's a brilliant layout. And around the same time, he started to dabble into 009, which is where the Mid-Sodor layout, the Mid-Sodor Railway, the Ulfstead Road layout.
It's a beautiful model, isn't it? And 009 Rabbit Warren
brilliant, representation of layouts of the time, specifically 009 layouts of the time, because nowadays you don't see many Rabbit Warrens at all.
And still steeped in that distinctive Awdry flavour.
Yeah. Wilbert did take the layouts out of about pretty much all over the country. Yeah, he would go quite a way with them. Generally, where there would be a Talyllyn railway stand or a railway society that he was connected to, and he would be with that stand to help raise the profile of it, get attention to it, and raise some money for the society as well. Farquhar was the more common one to see, both the Mark 1 and the current format. The Mid-Sodor, that went onto the circuit in 1969, and that appeared very rarely, but he's done a good handful of shows.
There's show stickers on it into the 1970s.
It was the last time the Mid-Sodor Ulfstead Road appeared was in the mid-1980s, and then after that it was primarily Farquhar that went out to shows. So when Wilbert first started exhibiting Farquhar, to be completely thorough and correct and proper to railway practice, there was a set timetable for a day that he would run through, and he used to basically narrate it by shouting at the audience, telling them what was going on.
He was very fastidious and insisted on the sequence being true to his
He's drawn proper train graphs for the entire branch line, not just Farquhar.
Timetables, notes.
So he did soon find he was losing his voice, so we're very lucky to have them here as part of the study collection. That are audio tapes that he recorded of the commentary for the Farquhar branch, and he would, when he recorded it, he would basically operate the layout, so you can hear the engine's motors going on the audio. And he would press play as he started and let his voice do all the work without having to speak himself.
And at the Narrow Gauge Railway Museum here in Towyn, we have a current focus on an oral history project where we're trying to garner as much information as we can from people who are around at that period, and fortunately, of course, the taped commentary fits well into that format, and we've been fortunate enough to be in a position to have it digitised, so now we can relax and now it's saved for posterity. The Narrow Gauge Railway Museum houses what I believe, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's the finest collection of narrow gauge artefacts and ephemera in the country. And it's been brought together over a period of some 50 odd years. Some stalwarts at the start of railway preservation had the presence of mind to involve a museum mentality along with the resurrection of the railway itself. And whilst the building has taken on several incarnations over the years, there was always an aim to have a purpose-built building. And as previously mentioned, in 2005, we're fortunate enough to have this encapsulated within that purpose-built rebuild.
Yeah, the museum was, I think it was formally founded in 1956, so it's not that long after, the birth of preservation, because it was, at the time, the Talyllyn was the only place really, as a, that was able to take stuff.
It became a repository for some very significant artefacts.
They didn't fit on the railway or had any history here. You had things like Russell, the Welsh Highland North Wales narrow gauge loco that was sat at Towyn Wharf for quite a while. Cambrai, which is still a part of the Narrow Gauge Railway Museum collection, though it is on loan somewhere.
And I think the Guinness loco number 13 was one of the earliest.
That was the first loco in the collection. Came from Ireland, directly donated by the chair of Guinness, who I believe lived in Bringlass along the Talyllyn for some reason. Yeah. So there was a connection there, and he knew what was happening. And when they were getting rid of steam at the Guinness brewery, he said, "You can have it for your museum." And that was the first loco to arrive, and it's still pride of place downstairs.
And recently, we've been keen to integrate the museum into the wider Talyllyn visitor experience, and we've instigated a programme of guided tours, which have been very successful, and virtual visits during lockdown, which have been very successful, to be able to promote the museum.
Yes, being able to, you can go and enjoy a lovely ride on the train, but don't leave straight away because you've got a wonderful museum to come and have a nose around.